This video is going to be a bit different from the rest of my videos because it deals with something happening in my state and not specifically social ideas or issues. It's something that matters to me, and if this really isn't your cup of tea, then you don't have to watch this. It has to do with a bill called Senate Bill 8.
I too am from Texas and have heard about this bill, and there are some things when first hearing about it I think are kind of, head scratching. But let's check out what your problem is.
This law is a very bad law. It involves a lot of different things, and we'll take a look at a few of the different components. But as for my opinion of the law as a whole, it is terrible. I believe that this will probably be struck down as unconstitutional.
Well, that would somewhat depend on how high up the appellate chain it goes. There's a very good chance that the Texas Appellate Court would uphold the law. If it goes up to the Fifth Circuit Court of Appeals, it will likely be upheld there, considering that court last year actually handed down rulings closing many abortion clinics in Louisiana. Where it might be stricken down as unconstitutional, however, is the Supreme Court of the United States. And even there it may get a little hairy, considering with Gorsuch's appointment that the Supreme Court would still be a 5-4 conservative vote. But who knows?
Before it goes into effect, but it's still something that needs to be talked about. It needs to be something that people are aware of, because it really is something very important, and it is a very bad bill. One of the main things...
No, I'm pausing you here because she says one of the main things that she's got a problem with coming up here. But it's going to be pretty much the only thing. I mean, there's going to be some nuance to it that she also has a problem with. But she said earlier that there would be several components in which makes the bill bad, but she is only going to basically talk about this one. That unto itself I don't have a problem with, because I've done that many times myself in my videos, where I'll say in one section of the video how I got to talk about all these things and don't actually cover everything. But to me it's important to bring this up because she had said several times that this is just really a bad bill. I don't think that one component necessarily can make the bill completely bad, but we'll listen to more of what she has to say, and then, we can all make up our minds later on.
That Senate Bill 8 does is it requires burial or cremation for fetal remains from medical facilities. This is not only for abortions, but also for miscarriages in medical facilities.
So Texas Bill 8 does not actually mention anything about miscarriages. What it does mention is fetal burial, cremation, or incineration, which the bill, kind of goes through some pains to make sure that it defines. It does not specifically say anything about miscarriage. So Texas Bill 8 does not actually mention anything about miscarriages. What it does mention is fetal burial, cremation, or incineration, which the bill, kind of goes through some pains to make sure that it defines. It does not specifically say anything about miscarriage. Now, you can basically, take a more nuanced look at the bill and contrive it to include miscarriage, but the bill itself only lends itself to abortions and how the state defines abortions, which it does so through Texas Health and Safety Code 245.0. So again, what it comes down to is that the bill itself does not mention anything about miscarriage. It basically speaks solely, from my reading of it and understanding, elective abortions.
Statistically, 1/3 of pregnancies end in a miscarriage. A lot of times mothers are not aware that they've miscarried. They just believe that it is part of their regular cycle. But sometimes it requires medical help. It requires going to a medical facility.
Right, and again, to my understanding of the bill, it does not specifically state anything about miscarriages, and if that is true, which I believe it to be, this does not apply.
Now, this law would require a burial or cremation for women who miscarry their baby.
Again, the bill itself deals with elective abortions, not miscarriages. Now, if you know something I don't know that's specifically in the bill, let me know. Prove me wrong, and I'll be happy to admit that I was incorrect on that.
Now, in Texas, the average for funerals for burial is about $10,000. This varies, and the national average is a little bit over $7,000. But that is a lot of money. Even if it is just a few $1,000s, that is a few $1,000s that you do not have to put towards other things. It's not necessary. Cremation is about $700 to $1,000 in Texas, depending on where you are. And this is effectively putting a heavy price tag upon abortion, and also the added bonus of natural miscarriages.
This kind of goes back to why she brought up the statistics of miscarriages. It's a money thing. And it's interesting that she brings it up. Speaking specifically to the added cost of burial or cremation on top of the cost of the abortion. Section 13, Subtitle B, Title 8, Health and Safety Code is amended by adding Chapter 697 to read as follows. This is from the bill. Chapter 697, Disposition of Embryonic and Fetal Tissue Remains, Section 697.001. Purpose. The purpose of this chapter is to express the state's profound respect for the life of the unborn by providing for a dignified disposition of embryonic and fetal tissue remains. Section 697.005, Burial or Cremation Assistance Registry. Listen to this. The department shall, 1, establish and maintain a registry of A, participating funeral homes and cemeteries willing to provide free common burial or low-cost private burial, and B, private nonprofit organizations that register with the department to provide financial assistance for the costs associated with burial or cremation of the embryonic and fetal tissue remains of an unborn child, and 2, make the registry information available on request to a physician, healthcare facility, or agent of a physician or healthcare facility. Now, this is Section 697.006. Ethical Fetal Remains Grant Program. The department shall develop a grant program that uses private donations to provide financial assistance for the costs associated with the disposing of embryonic and fetal tissue remains. Basically, the bill is setting up financial assistance for these burials and cremations. If that does in fact occur, if the bill does what it says it's going to do, taxpayers, which include that girl and myself, will be paying for this fetal tissue remains disposal. We'll be subsidizing that.
Now, this is a very sneaky way of overriding the right that people have to get abortions.
But how is the state doing that? The state cannot take away any woman's right to an abortion. The Supreme Court's made its decision on that. The state's in no way obligated to make it as easy as possible, but it can make it as difficult as it wants. The state can make those decisions. There is no taking away of any woman's rights for an abortion. I mean, you actually would have to point to Supreme Court law that states that any state has to make it as easy as possible for any woman to have an abortion.
It is a way to stop people because they don't want to have to pay the money, or they can't pay the money at that time.
So again, the best that you've got is that the state is trying to make it more difficult for people to get abortion by saying that there's going to be this added cost of burial or cremation. But again, let's keep in mind this is for elective procedures. You are choosing to have an abortion. So just guessing what the state has in mind is to get people to think more about the consequences of having unprotected sex, or not using birth control. There are consequences, whether or not you want to look at them as such. There are consequences involved with becoming impregnated. Added responsibilities, whether you decide to carry the child to term or if you decide to get an elective abortion, there are added responsibilities either way.
Requiring that fetal remains are buried or cremated is a shady way of taking an emotional response from people and using that to take away something that is supposed to be guaranteed to them.
You would really have to explain to me how they're not guaranteed this. I've already said that there is nothing the state can do to take away your right to an abortion. Again, they don't have to make it easy for you. You still have the legal ability to do it. The financial responsibility is on you. And again, the law that has been passed and signed into law, the bill rather, that has been signed into law by the governor, is to set up financial assistance for people who have elective abortions. Stipulations on that, it doesn't say anything in the bill about what the requirements to receive financial assistance are going to be. But what it comes down to is, again, you've said that these rights are being taken away, and they're just not. It's okay if you find the bill to be shaky or sneaky and shady, but there are no rights being taken away here. To continue to insist that a right is being taken away is insincere and borderline fallacious.
Now, I am coming from this from a pro-choice standpoint.
And for what it's worth, I do give you props for admitting your bias. How did I switch over from talking about her in the third person to talking to her directly? Damn videos.
But I would think that most reasonable people, regardless of being pro-life or pro-choice, would agree that placing an undue burden upon a mother who miscarries is just ridiculous.
Again, the bill itself refers only to elective abortions, nothing about miscarriages. Now, as a side note, I feel the need to repeat myself because she repeats herself. And I don't want this video to be taken I don't want to be accused of taking her out of context by any degree.
It has nothing to do with abortion. It has nothing to do with pro-choice or pro-life. It is something that happens naturally, and penalizing people who have miscarriages in medical facilities is just absolutely ridiculous. There is no actual benefit to this.
So I'm going to do my best to stay away from the miscarriage point because I've already stated that the bill does not speak specifically on it. As far as there being no benefit, well, I guess that kind of plays into what your biases are. You don't believe there's a benefit because your bias is that you're pro-choice. And you're approaching the abortion side from it because of the added cost or penalization of having to either cremate or bury the fetal tissue. Whereas I, being a pro-lifer, find the benefit to be, hopefully, that people again will consider their choices when using or not using birth control.
Law. This part of the law specifically. It is just a measure to stop abortions.
Again, bias comes into play here. The state cannot stop abortions. Continuing to say so is not going to make it true. But as far as my bias is concerned, the law only stands to help reduce abortions. Like it or not, you live in a state that is mostly anti-abortion. That's just the way it is here. You can try to hope to turn the state blue at some point to where maybe people don't care about abortion as much, but for the time being, the state on a whole or overall does care about abortions, and it's very anti-abortion.
And it also has the added measure of screwing over people who have nothing to do with abortions.
You know, I've seen a few of your videos, and I don't recall there being as many of appeal to emotion as I've seen in this particular video. And it's understandable. Abortion is a hot button topic, and people get emotionally charged about it. But the appeal to emotion here about screwing people over, especially when it's not, again, by my understanding, correct.
It's just a natural thing that happens. Now, that's not everything in the law. This also covers a bunch of different things, and I'm getting a lot of my information from a Huffington Post article. And I know you're going to cringe at me saying Huffington Post, but it is the most comprehensive article that I found on the subject in the short time that I researched it before making this video.
No kidding, you're going to get cringe on this. Because Huffington Post is shit. Finally, the cursing comes out. They are not the best place to get important information like this. For crying out loud, the bill is available for you to read online. And I'm sorry, when you... This is kind of how cringed I am right now from the fact that you used HuffPo. They are always going to give you a left slant on what they're reporting. Always. I have yet to ever see an article where there was not a left slant written by anybody there. But the bill, read the bill. Don't take my word for it. I've cited and actually have read parts of the bill to you. But for crying out loud, this is an important topic involving your state. And you've already said that people are going to cringe at HuffPost. You had to know beforehand by that statement that you were not going to get the best information. It's not the most comprehensive article that you've read, because it didn't even tell you that the bill is setting up financial assistance for people who get elective abortions, and that the fact is that it has to do with elective abortions only. Yeah, that's why I'm cringing about it, because you took what they had to say, whole-hatted, if that's a phrase. You believed what they said. There is, based on your emotion, you did not read this article with any degree of skepticism, which is funny, because my understanding is that you're an atheist, and I thought atheists were supposed to be the most skeptical people out there. Oh my gosh, I'm sorry. Like I said, I've seen your stuff. I like your stuff, but this is just not great. This is not great.
So, just deal with it.
And so I've dealt with it in a way that says you should not be believing this Huffington Post article. And I think deep down you know this.
Another crucial aspect of this law is its ban on second trimester abortions, or at least the safest type of second trimester abortion. Second trimester abortions, according to this article, only account for about 11% of abortions.
The fact that you're going back to this article makes me want to stop the video, but I'm going to go ahead and try to continue. I do thank you, however, for posting the link to the article so I could have a look at it. So as per usual with Huffington Post, they make these blanket statements, especially in this one, that it's basically a felony they're saying that it's a felony for abortions. They're not being specific on the types of abortions that would be considered a crime in the state of Texas. So what does the bill actually say about making it a felony to perform an abortion? So criminal penalty: a person who violates section 171.102 commits an offense. An offense under this section is a state jail felony. Well, I guess we got to go back up because this is section 103. Section 102, partial birth abortions prohibited. A physician or other person may not knowingly perform a partial birth abortion. Now, we can get into the argument as far as whether or not it's good to do it in the second or third trimester. The second trimester may be the safest, I don't know, but the state has said, no, you can't do this. And I'm pulling for recollection right now, but, Huffington also said this is a redundant law for something that was done a decade ago. But if I remember correctly, that decades-old law had to deal with third trimester abortions. So, maybe they're talking about something else.
And in addition to that, about 95% of second trimester abortions happen using this method that's being banned. And so effectively, it is banning all abortions after the second trimester. But it gets worse. In addition to that part making it illegal, any physician caught doing this procedure would obviously face criminal charges. But a representative actually pointed out that The wording of the bill makes it so that possibly anyone who aids could be held liable.
Can we not talk about what one Democratic senator in Texas states could possibly happen and just get to the facts? Per my reading of the bill, and it is possible that I missed something, there is nothing in the bill that states that a friend or family member who drives the woman to the abortion clinic could be held or could be charged with any crime. It does state that anybody dealing directly with the clinic, that's anybody who works for the clinic, that does include even the secretary or whoever who books the appointment, could be charged with a crime.
The mother herself would be exempt, but a whole host of other people could potentially be held liable for this procedure being done. The last important thing that this law has is that it also bans fetal tissue donations for abortions. It's specifically for women who have abortions.
Yes, the bill does state that. The law says for abortions, but more specifically, elective abortions. They are charging people with felonies who basically sell tissue for elective abortions. Those are the only abortions that are stated in this law.
Now, fetal tissue donation is very helpful for the medical community. Because of the stem cells in fetal tissue, it has a whole host of things that it can help with. Now, this law specifically is for abortions and women who have abortions.
Again, this is my problem with you using this HuffPo article. It is saying abortion in a general term. The bill itself says elective abortions. That means the state does not want people who are willingly going out and getting abortions as a form of birth control, not women who need to terminate their pregnancies to save their own lives, or even, actually, I'm not getting into the rape one because that's a whole can of worms that, Point being is that you are being misled by this Huffington Post article on a subject that is of great import to you. Read the bill and then let me know if I'm wrong.
And so instead of making the best out of your situation, you cannot donate fetal tissue to be researched. And instead, you have to have a macabre funeral for this aborted fetus.
Well, that's interesting considering that nowhere in the law does it require anyone to have a funeral. A burial? Yeah, the burial part is in there. Funeral? No. There is a difference between the two. I'm being technical, I understand. But for the sake of making sure that we are correct about something that is, again, a hot button issue, there is nothing in the bill that says you have to have a funeral. It just says a burial. You don't have to have a ceremony. There's no wake, nothing. You can just have the fetus buried. That's it.
I don't think it matters where you fall on the pro-life or pro-choice debate. I think that having a macabre funeral for an aborted fetus, regardless of whether or not you think that that is a life or not, I believe that it is just a very cheap shot.
Well, in this case, this is where you would be wrong, because it does matter as to where you fall on the left or the right of the issue. Mostly because people on the right don't necessarily have a problem with this bill. Now, if the state were saying it's all out of your pocket, you deal with it, as far as having any kind of burial or cremation for your electively aborted fetus, then I would say, well, yeah, that is kind of silly. However, I have less of a problem with it, again, based on my understanding of what the bill actually says, with there being the added cost of a burial, considering that the state is setting up means to actually subsidize the cost of the burial or cremation.
I believe that it is taking people's emotions and basically letting them dictate the law. It's taking people's emotional reactions and taking advantage of them to push an agenda. And I think that that is sick.
Well, I'm sorry that I can't give you full credit here when you're talking about people manipulating emotions here, because this is basically what you're doing when you say, when you make appeals to emotions, say this is sick, these people are being shady or sneaky or being taken advantage of. It makes it harder to take you seriously when, again, you rely on so much emotion.
And that's basically where I stand on this. I'm very passionate about this.
And again, this is another problem I have with your video here. This is something you say you're passionate about. You are referencing a Huffington Post article that is dealing in such generalizations that it's giving you no specifics on what the bill actually says. The bill itself is not very long. It's probably about as long as this Huffington Post article that you are referencing. And I'm sorry, but I would think that somebody who has passion for the abortion issue would actually go and read the law. Get the specifics for yourself instead of waiting for what you acknowledge as cringe, a Huffington Post article. That's about all I can say on that point.
Specifically, I believe that every woman should have a choice.
What choice are we talking about? Exactly when in her pregnancy she can terminate the fetus?
But I know that a lot of people don't agree with me. But I do think that we can find common ground.
Well, I believe that we can too. And feel free to hit me up on Twitter. I follow you on Twitter. And if you want to have a discussion about it, sure, we can talk about where we can find common ground. But you have to have a grasp of what the bill is actually saying it's going to do, not what Huffington Post is telling you that the bill is going to do.
In opposing a law that puts an undue burden upon people who don't even have abortions. Like I said before, you can disagree with me and you can tell me in the comment section below. Of course, only if you want to. If you don't want to, you don't have to, but I would appreciate it. And as always, I will see you when I see you.
I can definitely appreciate the fact that you're open to comments and maybe an opposing view. I, however, can't do it in a comment on your video here. I have to make a video myself. What drew me into doing a response video to this is because the things that you were saying about the bill already got me questioning, is this what the bill actually says? Because I'd heard of the bill and I heard what people on the left have been saying about it. That's it's a crazy bill. You know, it's asking people who, or women who get in abortions, to have funerals and whatnot. So I'd heard enough about it, and hearing you, somebody who I follow and watch their content, saying this, I'm like, okay, I think there's something misleading going on here. So I went and looked up the bill myself, started reading it, and I'm sorry, but you know, everything you're commenting on the bill is not exactly correct. And I apologize. I'm not saying that Huffington Post can never get it right, because even a stopped watch is right twice a day. I haven't seen where they've been correct. And it's because I never saw where they were correct that I stopped reading anything that came out of them. Again, the article that you're referencing, first of all, comes from Huffington Post. Secondly, makes broad generalizations on what the bill is going to do is in regards to abortions in general and who exactly is going to be charged with a crime. And the possibility thing, oh my gosh. See, me being a Christian, am often derided for not being enough of a skeptic, yet you, again, I assume, being at the very least an atheist, had no seemed to have zero skepticism when it came to this article. Well, that's going to do it for me, folks. I do apologize for this video being so long. I do appreciate it if you were able to make it through 30 minutes of a response. But like that girl, I felt it important to address the issues, especially after having read the bill itself. Thanks so much for hanging out there, guys. Appreciate you sticking with me, and I hope to see you all again soon.